Nick Young and his girlfriend Rachel Chu, an economics professor at New York University and New York native, traveled to Singapore for the wedding of his best friend Colin, who is marrying Araminta Lee. In Singapore, Rachel visits her college friend Kaale and her family, who are shocked when she tells them she is dating Nick Young. Kaale reveals that Nick's family is extremely wealthy and famous, and are members of high society. At a dinner party at the Young estate, Nick introduces Rachel to his mother Eleanor, while his cousin Astrid discovers that her husband Michael, who comes from a more humble background than the Youngs, has been having an affair. Rachel senses that Eleanor dislikes her. At Araminta's bachelorette party, Rachel meets Amanda, who reveals she is Nick's former girlfriend and hints Rachel may not be able to integrate into such a high-class family with her lower background. Rachel finds her hotel room vandalized by the other girls, who deem her a gold digger, but is comforted by Astrid. Nick attends Colin's bachelor party, where he reveals to Colin his plan to propose to Rachel. Colin expresses his concern about the trouble it will cause them, especially with Nick being expected to stay in Singapore and run his family's corporation and Rachel loving her job in New York, as well as the difference in their statuses. Nick apologizes to Rachel for not telling her who he really was and takes her to make jiaozi dumplings with his family. Here, Eleanor recounts the sacrifices she made to become a part of the Young family and makes jabs at Rachel for her American background. Eleanor later privately recounts to Rachel how Nick's father had to cast his own green ring to propose to her as Nick's grandmother refused to give him the family ring, owing to Eleanor not being the first or even second choice. She tells Rachel that she will never be enough for Nick or his family. Kaale convinces Rachel to stand up to Eleanor and earn her respect. On the day of the wedding, Astrid confronts Michael about his affair. Michael blames his unhappiness and the great financial disparity between them on her. During the wedding reception, Eleanor and Nick's grandmother privately confront Rachel and Nick. Using the findings of a private investigation, Eleanor reveals that Rachel's father is alive, and Rachel was conceived through an adulterous affair, after which her mother, Kerry, abandoned her husband and fled to the United States. They demand that Nick stop seeing Rachel for fear of a scandal, as they cannot be linked to such a family. Rachel is stunned, as Kerry told her that her father was dead. She flees and stays at Kaale's home, depressed and unwilling to speak to Nick. Kerry arrives in Singapore, explaining that her husband was abusive and that the comfort an old classmate provided turned into love and a surprise pregnancy. She fled with baby Rachel in fear that her husband would kill them. Kerry reveals that Nick was the one who had called her to Singapore and urges Rachel to talk to him. When they meet, Nick apologizes and proposes to Rachel, saying that he is willing to leave his family behind to be with her. Rachel arranges to meet Eleanor at a mahjong parlor. Over a game of mahjong, she reveals to Eleanor that she declined Nick's proposal so his relationship with his family would not be ruined. She tells Eleanor to remember that when Nick eventually marries someone who lives up to her standards, it will be because of a selfless act on the part of Rachel, a girl Eleanor looks down upon. Rachel lets Eleanor win, and leaves with Kerry, who glances at Eleanor as they depart. Meanwhile, Astrid moves out, telling Michael his ego, insecurities, and unwillingness to make their marriage work caused it to fail. Elsewhere, Eleanor has a meeting with Nick, emotionally affected by her exchange with Rachel. Rachel and Kerry board a flight back to New York City at Singapore Changi Airport, but are interrupted by Nick, who proposes with Eleanor's green ring, revealing her blessing. In tears, Rachel accepts and they stay in Singapore one more night for an engagement party, where Eleanor nods at Rachel in acknowledgement, Rachel having finally earned her respect.